Our scripture lesson for this morning, if you'd like to follow along, it's printed in your bulletin. It comes from the Gospel of John, the 18th chapter, verses 28 through 40. This is the last Sunday in the church calendar, as I said, and so we usually have scriptures that say something about the end of times. Normally they come from the Synoptic Gospels, and they speak of Christ returning and those sort of things out of the latter chapters of Matthew or Mark. But this time it's kind of interesting because it comes from the Gospel of John. And John, well, what can you say about John? He's almost from beginning to end different than the first three Gospels. A few examples, well, essentially the chronology, the writing style, the outline, almost everything is different. Whereas the only time in the first three Gospels Jesus goes to Jerusalem is the last week of his life, it's Passion Week. But in John, immediately after his baptism, Jesus goes to the temple and cleanses the temple. So that's a very different timeline. If you read the last week, the Last Supper comes on a different night than the first three Gospels, and foot washing is inserted rather than other things. And curiously, on Friday, the crucifixion takes place at the exact same time as the sheep are slaughtered or begun to be sacrificed in the temple. So, there's a drama taking place here, and John is telling that drama in a way that works out almost like a Broadway play, swirling to a climax this morning in the scripture that I will read. The other notable thing about John is his outline follows the I am passages. If you hear the I am the good shepherd, or I am the bread of life, or I am the vine and you are the branches, those all come from John, and those two are written in a style that leads the reader and is very, very different from the first three Gospels. In fact, one of the stories we love most is only found in John, and it was only inserted into this Gospel a long time after the canon had already started coming together, and that's the story of the woman caught in adultery. You remember that story. She's caught and she comes and falls at Jesus' feet, and he draws something in the sand that she can see. That's my first question when I meet my Creator. I want to know what was drawn in the sand. It doesn't say, but that was such a beloved text that even though it wasn't in the earliest copies of John or found in the other Gospels, the church voted to bring it in and put it in there. So this is an interesting passage. It is the trial of Jesus. It takes place the last Friday morning of his life, and it has some things that are unique to it. One of which, Pilate, who is the Roman governor, the representative of Caesar in Palestine, or actually Judea, offers the crowd, rather than to execute Jesus, he says, well, there's a custom that I could go to that says I could release any prisoner you want. And he has his soldiers go down into the dungeon and bring up a person who would, in our time, would probably be equal to bin Laden. He was a terrorist, a Jewish terrorist, one of the Sicarii, and he holds these two in front of the audience and says, which one do you want me to release? The crowd shouts for the one we would say is the terrorist. But here's what's interesting. In the Greek, both their names are Jesus. Jesus Barabbas and Jesus of Nazareth. So Pilate is really saying, which Jesus do you want? Let me read now, and I invite you to follow along as it's written in your bulletin in the center of the back. And so the high priest and crowd led Jesus. They led them from Caiaphas to the Roman governor's palace. It was early morning. They themselves did not enter the palace because they didn't want to be disqualified. They would have been unclean and couldn't have participated in the Passover. So Pilate came out to them and spoke. He says, "What charge do you bring against this man?" And they said, "Well, if he hadn't been doing something evil, do you think we'd be bothering you?" Pilate said, "You take him, you judge him by your law." And the Jews said, "Well, we're not allowed to kill anyone." This would confirm Jesus' word indicating that the way he would die. So Pilate went back into the palace and called for Jesus, and he said, "Are you king of the Jews?" And Jesus answered, "Are you saying this on your own, or did others tell you about me?" Pilate said, "Do I look like a Jew? Your people and your high priests turned you over to me. What did you do?" Jesus responded, "My kingdom doesn't consist of what you see around you. If it did, my followers would fight so that I wouldn't be handed over. But I'm not that kind of king, not the world's kind of king." So Pilate said, "Just tell me, are you a king or not?" And Jesus answered him, "You tell me. Because I am a king. I was born and entered the world so that I could witness to the truth. And everyone who cares for the truth, who has any feeling for the truth, will recognize my voice." Pilate said, "Well, tell me, what is truth?" And then he went back out to the Jews and told them, "I find nothing wrong in this man, but it is a custom that I pardon one prisoner at Passover time. Do you want me to pardon the king of the Jews?" And they shouted back, "No, not this one, but Barabbas." And Barabbas was a Jewish freedom fighter. So ends the reading of this gospel. May God add a blessing to the hearing and the living of this word.